With an expansive rail network that includes 5,700 stations, there's no doubt that train travel in Germany is one of the most convenient ways to get around. But for first-timers, it can be a confusing system to navigate, from getting the best deals on tickets to understanding all the different train types. Well, this video will explain everything. Hi, I'm Christina from happytowander.com, and after living in Germany for over 5 years, I've gotten to know the German train system very well. So well, in fact, that I've even been on British TV explaining the wonders of this train system, which I realize is a super strange flex, but when else am I going to be able to bring it up? Anyways, in this video, I'm going to walk you through step by step how to travel by train in Germany, from buying your tickets and finding the best deals, all the way to locating your platform and your seat on the day of. So let's start with a brief introduction to the German rail system. Deutsche Bahn is Germany's national rail company, responsible for the vast majority of trains in the country. When it works great. But when things go wrong, they can be a bit of a nightmare to travel with, which is why Deutsche Bahn has become the butt of many jokes regarding delays and high prices. But bear in mind, these jokes are often made by Germans who don't realize just how bad train systems can be in other countries, like in Canada, where I'm from. So with that in mind, I do think that train travel is a great way to get around Germany. It's not flawless, but it is pretty great. Now, another train operator to keep in mind, especially if you're on a budget, is Flixtrain. I've personally never traveled with Flixtrain just because when I lived in Germany, they were still offering really limited routes and not really in the area that I was living in, so I can't speak from personal experience, but their main value proposition is really that they have dirt cheap fares starting at $4.99, so if you're on a budget, they're definitely worth considering. That said, Flixtrain is fairly no frills and they really just have one standard class, so for the rest of this video, I'm going to be focusing mainly on Deutsche Bahn products. Now let's discuss different types of trains in Germany. Broadly speaking, we can divide German trains into 3 categories: long distance, regional, and local, such as S-Bahn or U-Bahn trains. Understanding the difference between these is really important because they have a really huge impact on journey time and also cost. So I'm going to go over a few of the main categories as well as their abbreviations that you often see on the booking portals and also in the train numbers. Long-distance trains in Germany are typically used to connect larger cities and are therefore usually quicker. But they typically require booking in advance, with reservations being a good idea, especially in busy periods. Under this umbrella, we have ICE, intercity express trains, which are the fancy high-speed trains that get you between major cities and can go up to 300 kilometers an hour. Especially quick are the ICE sprinter trains, which take even fewer stops. There's also the intercity trains, which also travel between cities in Germany, but are sometimes a bit slower than the ICE ones, maxing out at about 200 kilometers an hour. And often they're not as new and not as nice. There's also Eurocity trains, which travel between cities in Germany and elsewhere in Europe. These can look different to usual Deutsche Bahn trains because depending on the route, they may be operated by another country's rail provider. Now, in contrast, regional trains cover much shorter distances, usually within one region or one state. Reservations and assigned seats are not possible for these trains, and their prices are fixed, so buying in advance isn't necessary. They're also covered by a range of special deals, which I'm going to go over later. But under this umbrella, we have Interregio Express trains, which travel longer distances between regions, but usually at a much slower pace than the long-distance trains. There's also the regional express trains, which connect destinations in one region, but don't stop at every stop on the route. These tend to be faster than the regional Bahn trains, which connect destinations in one region and do stop at every stop along a particular route. Lastly, on the local front, we have options like the S-Bahn, which are trains that connect stops within cities and out to nearby suburbs, as well as the U-Bahn in some cities, which are underground trains that connect stops within the city itself, like the subway in New York or the metro in Paris. These are also typically covered by the special deals that we'll be discussing later. Now let's run through step by step how to take the train in Germany. I'm personally a huge fan of traveling by train, but depending on your trip and your priorities, it might not actually be the best fit. Overall, I think taking the train in Germany makes the most sense if you are prioritizing scenery, comfort, and convenience. That said, if budget is your number one priority, you might want to look into traveling by bus with companies like Flixbus, or participating in a rideshare like with BlaBlaCar. Or if you're booking with budget airlines, sometimes it's even cheaper to fly than to take the train. Of course, if you want utmost flexibility, renting a car is definitely the best option. That said, if you have decided that train travel is the best option for you, then let's move on to the next step, which is buying your tickets. I would strongly advise booking tickets in advance online, just because that's when you're going to get the best deal. And while you can buy tickets in person, often going to a customer service desk does incur an additional service fee, and it's just really stressful trying to buy your tickets on the day of before your departure. In addition to getting your tickets online, I would also advise downloading the Deutsche Bahn app. Not only can you search up different routes and actually buy your tickets within the app itself, you can also keep your tickets within the app and even check yourselves in on longer distance trains. Now, there are a lot of different considerations that need to be made when you're buying your tickets, so I'm going to go through each of them now. The first one is Bahn card versus no Bahn card. If you plan to stay a while and you plan to take a lot of different trains in Germany, something that might be worth purchasing is something known as a Bahn card, which are cards that you purchase for a set fee that then give you discounts on most train journeys, either 25% or 50%, depending on the one you buy. While these cards are definitely geared more towards locals, oftentimes trains can be so pricey last minute that you can actually recoup the cost of your Bahn card within just a few journeys. Especially interesting for short-term visitors are the Probebahn cards or Trial Bahn cards. These allow you to buy a cheaper membership that's essentially a trial for 3 months rather than for a whole year. Just don't forget to cancel your subscription, because you have to do that 6 weeks before the expiry date, or else it auto-renews to an annual one, and obviously that's going to cost way more. Honestly though, for most tourists who are visiting for a short amount of time, there are better ways to save money, so let's go over some of those now. Our next consideration is getting a standard ticket versus getting special tickets or rail passes. If you are only booking a few train journeys during your time in Germany, honestly, the best option is most likely to just buy tickets for the journeys you're taking, meaning hopping on the Deutsche Bahn app or website, entering point A and point B, and buying tickets for each of the trips that you take. Sometimes though, this won't be the way to get the best deal, so I'm going to go over a few different ways to save money depending on your circumstances. First off, do know that there are age-based discounts on Deutsche Bahn for children, youth, and seniors. So be sure to enter your age when you're searching up different routes, because then that's how you activate the discount. And to save money on regional and local trains, there are a few different options that are almost always guaranteed to save you money, especially if you're taking day trips. For instance, if your travels are restricted to one German state, look into statewide regional tickets, which essentially give you unlimited regional trains in a day for a specific state, with more savings the more people you bring. There's also a Germany-wide version of this ticket that allows you to get unlimited regional trains in a day all throughout the country. Now, an even better deal if you plan to use regional trains exclusively across Germany is the relatively new Deutschland ticket, which is only 49 euros and, I'm not even joking, gets you unlimited regional trains in the country for an entire month. Of course, there is a small catch. Because this ticket is more targeted to locals rather than tourists, it's only available on a subscription basis. That said, you can just enroll for a month, you just have to make sure you cancel it in time so that it doesn't renew for the next month. Now, unfortunately, saving money on long distance trains isn't nearly as simple. Generally speaking, the best way to save money on long distance trains is to just book as far in advance as possible. If you're not able to book in advance though, a potential money saver is getting a rail pass. For instance, if you're just traveling within Germany, there is a German rail pass that you can buy that offers unlimited journeys either on a flex basis, meaning for a few days within a set period, or on a consecutive basis, meaning a set number of days in a row. If you're traveling to other countries in Europe, then another possibility is a Eurail pass or an Interrail pass if you're a resident of Europe already. Used properly, these passes can save you a lot of money, but only in certain situations. So for more information on that, be sure to watch my full Eurail review. Now, once you've decided the type of ticket you want, it's onwards to a few more considerations. Firstly, first versus second class. To be completely honest with you, on regional trains, there's not a dramatic difference between first and second class. You're mainly paying to be in a separate area, and maybe you have a bit more space and the seats are slightly comfier. There's not a huge difference. In contrast, when you're doing a long distance train, booking first class often means comfier seats. Usually your seat reservation is included, and on ICE trains, this also includes table service to your seat. So if you're looking to splurge on first class, doing so on an ICE train might make a lot more sense, especially if you're introverted and you're traveling solo, because in these cars there's actually single seats that you can book. Now the next consideration is reserved versus unreserved seats. Reservations are pretty much never mandatory on board German long-distance trains, and they're not even possible at all on regional or local trains. That said, I would highly advise making a reservation if you're an anxious traveler or if you're traveling during a peak period. The cost is only about €5, and having that peace of mind for me is more than worth it. If you do end up reserving a seat though, another consideration is carriage and seat types. When making a reservation, you can usually do so through an interactive map, where you can choose things like window versus aisle, or how close you are to amenities like the bathroom, luggage racks, or the onboard restaurant. Do note though that some train carriages in Germany have specific purposes, like quiet cars, which are silent, cell phone carriages where you can freely make calls, family areas, bike areas, and also accessible zones. For many long-distance trains, there's also differences in seating configurations and areas, with the main two options being open saloon seating, which is your standard train setup with seats in a carriage, sometimes with a table around which 4 people can sit facing each other, or compartment seating, which are more old-school closed compartments with seats facing each other. These are fun if you get them to yourself or with your own group, but they can be a bit intimate if you're just sharing with strangers. Now, another choice that you're given when you're buying tickets is the Sparpreis versus Flexpreis. This option doesn't actually change your train time or route. What it does change though is the price and also how flexible your ticket is. So essentially the Sparpreis is like a really cheap version of the ticket that only allows you to go on that specific train and that specific time. There's really very little wiggle room for flexibility, pretty much no wiggle room, especially if you're booking a Super Sparpreis ticket, which is the cheapest option available. In contrast, the Flexpreis ticket is way more flexible, allowing you to travel on any train that day for your chosen route, or in the case of Flexpreis Plus, even trains the day before or 2 days after. Lastly, we have bike and pet add-ons. So if you're traveling on a German train with a bicycle or with a pet above a certain size, then you are required to buy an additional ticket for them, so just keep that in mind. All right, with your tickets booked, it's time to move on to step 3, which is to get snacks. On the day of, I highly recommend you go out and get some snacks in advance because you are 100% allowed to bring your own food and drink on board German trains. And with regional trains, there's actually not going to be any way to get food or drink. And in the case of long distance trains, there are some options, but they can be a bit limited, and also they're not the most cost effective either. At the very least, I would get some water or something to drink, just because you never know when you'll be hit with a delay. And if you're on a regional train especially, you'll have no options to get anything to drink. Luckily, train stations have a lot of different options these days, so be sure to check them out. Now let's move on to step number 4, which is arriving at the station. First off, before leaving, double check that you know which station you're going to. Because in Germany, especially in the cities, there's oftentimes multiple stations in one city. If it's your first time going to this station, I would honestly go at least 30 minutes in advance, just because in the bigger cities, these train stations can be absolutely massive with 20+ platforms, multiple stories, and just a lot of opportunities to get lost. So make sure you get there with a lot of time to spare. Now, if you're arriving to the station by public transport, make sure you keep an eye out for signs like this that show you where the platforms are. Now, once you find the platform area, next up is determining which platform you need to go to. If you have the DB app, usually they'll tell you in advance where your platform is, but I usually am quite paranoid and I like to double check on the board. When looking at the board, remember that the trains will not necessarily say your destination, but rather the final destination of the train. So look for the time and train number, and underneath maybe for the list of stops to see if your destination is listed. Then you can figure it out from there. Be aware that some cities like Munich have a different name in German, so if you're looking up at the screen, you're going to be looking for the German name of the place that you're going. Next up, it's time to get to the platform. Platform numbers will generally be very well marked, so just look up for signs before making your way. You won't need to have your ticket for this part just because tickets are checked on board and there are no fare gates. Now, when you get to the platform, make sure that the train is correct by verifying on the signs. One tricky thing to be mindful of is some trains in Germany actually do split, meaning depending on which car you sit in, you're going to end up in a different destination. This is a very common trap that people fall into, myself included. So before you get on board, make sure you verify with the sign outside the car that that car is going to be going to your final destination. Now, if you have a reserved seat, you're going to need to take some extra steps to make sure you get to the right place. German trains can be super long, so if you have a seat reservation, make sure you're standing in the right part of the platform to get onto your carriage. Otherwise, you might have to just throw yourself on the train and then awkwardly shuffle your way through to find the right car, which is obviously not very fun. Now, if you don't have an assigned seat, it's super easy. Just find a carriage in the right class and then find a free seat and go from there. If you don't have a reserved seat, usually I find that the further you walk, the more free seats there'll be. If the door isn't already open, then look for a button like this and press it. This will open the doors not just of the train, but also within the carriages themselves. If you have any large suitcases, keep an eye out for luggage racks that are on either side of the car. Sometimes there's also going to be one in the middle, but that's usually only for the longer distance trains. If you have a smaller bag, usually there's racks above the seat for that, or you can look for cracks between seats that are back to back or behind the seats that are at the end of the carriages. Usually there's going to be space there as well. Now, if you don't have a reservation, before sitting down, make sure your seat isn't reserved and make sure you're not taking up a priority space if the train is looking full. Seats that are reserved for long distance trains are usually marked with an electronic screen that show you which portion of the route the seat is reserved for. So let's say you're going from Munich to Berlin. If you look at the screen, it might say that the seat is taken between Munich and Berlin, or maybe just for a portion of that route. If your trip doesn't conflict with the reservation, in that case, you can feel free to take a seat. Just be prepared to vacate the seat if someone with a reservation comes. Do note, however, that sometimes the screens don't give you any meaningful information. Sometimes it'll either say this or this, and both essentially mean that the seat could be taken and you'll have to vacate it if someone comes. It's just the system doesn't have the information it needs to tell you if the seat is actually reserved. There are also some seats that are reserved for Bahn Comfort customers who are VIP who travel frequently, so just keep that one in mind. Now, finally, we're on to step 8, which is to get comfortable and enjoy your journey. Now, once you're all settled, be on the lookout for a few different features. There's usually hooks that you can put your coat and scarves on. There's also usually charging areas found between the seats or on the wall. On long distance trains and some S-Bahns, there's even Wi-Fi, although service is honestly quite spotty. And for longer distance trains, there's typically an onboard restaurant or bistro. Now, as you get comfy, keep your ticket and ID handy in case controllers come on board. After your journey is complete, it's time to move on to the next step, which is disembarking. If you're not getting off at the final stop of the train, I would really recommend starting to gather your belongings and getting ready to disembark about 10 minutes before your arrival time. This way you're not stressed trying to pack everything up once you realize the train has arrived at the station. To keep track of when you'll be arriving, keep an eye on the screens, or you can also check on your app as well. Now, upon arrival, again, if the door isn't opening, keep an eye out for a button like this, press it, and you should be free. Now, if you're looking for a place to store your bags, whether that's because it's too early for you to check in or you're only in town for the day, just know that most major German train stations will have lockers that you can rent out for a fee. So keep an eye out for a symbol like this, and you can use that to stow your bags. And take note that if your train is more than an hour delayed, you are entitled to compensation. So just make sure that you get some proof of the delay, whether that's a photo of the arrivals board showing that the train was delayed, or even some written confirmation from an employee. All right, I hope that guide to German train travel was helpful. If you're looking for more tips, you can actually check out the written version of this guide where I go actually surprisingly more into detail. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure to like and subscribe for more practical travel videos just like this one. I'll see you guys next week. Bye!